Chapter 4, A Dormant Civilization. This conversation took place on the second day of my stay. Anastasia and I were sitting quietly together in our long-time favorite spot by the lake. Evening was coming on, but the cool evening freshness had not yet set in. A barely perceptible breeze fanned our bodies from constantly changing angles, as though designed to delight us with the many and variegated fragrances of the taiga. With just a trace of a smile on her face, Anastasia contemplated the mirror surface of the lake before us. She seemed to be waiting for me to ask her the questions I wanted answers to. Only somehow I wasn't able to reduce my questions to a brief and concrete formulation. It appeared that what I managed to formulate in my mind did not reflect the main thing I really wanted to know. So I approached it circuitously.
Hey, Mom.
Hey, I'm reading. Go put that in the trash, please. That's not where that belongs.
In the kitchen?
Yes. You see, Anastasia, here I am writing books using using many of the words you have given me, even though I don't understand all your words right off. But it's not so much the words, but the reaction to them that has me baffled most of all. Before I met you, I was a simple entrepreneur. I worked and, like everyone else, wanted to make as much money as I could. I could afford to enjoy a drink and have a rousing good time, but nobody laid into me or my company's workers with the kind of criticism that the media is now overwhelming me with. Strange as it may seem, back then nobody faulted me for earning money. But as soon as the books came out, some personages began right off publishing articles, saying I was nothing but a gold digger, if not a charlatan, or a bigot. It'd be okay if it were just me, but they've also gone and insulted my readers too, calling them bigots and fanatics. And goodness knows what they write about you. Either they argue that you don't exist at all, or they say you're the queen of the heathens. It's funny how everything's turned out. Here in the Siberia, there is a lot of minority ethnic groups with different cultures and beliefs, and some of them still practice shamanism. And nothing bad is ever said about them. On the contrary, they say that these people's cultures need to be preserved. And here you are, all alone, well, apart from your grandfather and great-grandfather and now your son. You live all alone here. You don't ask for anything, and yet the words you say provoke a storm of emotions. Some people absolutely delight in the words you say and get all excited and start acting on them, while others attack you with unabashed fury and anger. Why is that so? And you, Vladimir, can you not answer this question yourself? Myself? Yes, yourself. I've got very strange thoughts running around in my head. I get the impression that out there in human society there are some kind of unknown people or forces who will do everything they can to make people suffer. These forces thrive on wars, the drug trade, prostitution, and disease, and on their constant increase. How else can you explain it? They don't attack books about murderers or magazines with half-naked women, but there's something about books on nature or books on the soul that isn't to their liking. And in your case, it's even more peculiar. Here you are calling upon people to build their paradise domains for happy families, and many people are strongly behind you in this endeavor. And not just in their words, people are starting to act. I myself have seen people who have taken land and begun working on it, as you said, building their own kin's domain. This include young and old, rich and poor, and yet somebody's really uptight about that, and the media is constantly trying to distort what you say. They resort to outright lies, to put it bluntly. I can't understand how the words of a single woman living in the taiga, and apparently not bothering anyone, can be so powerful. And why would anybody try to engage in direct conflict with your words? There's also this claim that behind those words of yours lurks some kind of... Okay, some kind of great power. Occultism, maybe. And what do you think? Is there a power behind them, or are they just words? I think there must be some kind of occult power in them, yes. That's what some of the esoterics are saying. Be careful, Vladimir. and try not to take in what others say. Try listening instead to your own heart and soul. I'm trying, only I haven't got enough information. What information specifically? Well, for instance, what ethnic background are you, Anastasia? What religion are you and your relatives? Or maybe you don't have any ethnic background? I have, Anastasia replied, rising to her feet. But if I tell you now, the dark forces will rise up and scream in fright. Then they will try to come down with all their might, not just on me, but to crush you too. You will be able to withstand it once you have got beyond noticing their attempts and give your thought over completely to the marvelous reality. But as long as you consider yourself defenseless in the face of their anger, you should withdraw your question and forget about it until the right time. Anastasia was now standing in front of me, her arms hanging loose at her side. I gazed up at her from below and couldn't help noticing how proudly, splendidly, and unassailably she carried herself. Her tender and inquiring look was awaiting my response. I had no doubt that what she was about to say was indeed capable of provoking some kind of extraordinary reaction. I had no doubt because over the years I have known her, I have seen a feverish reaction to her words on the part of many people. And for that reason, I don't doubt the possibility of danger either. But I responded, I'm not afraid. Even though I'm sure it's all going to come down about just as you say, maybe I'll be able to hold out myself. But then I'm not the only one. We have a son now. I don't want anything to threaten him. At this point, Vladimir suddenly appeared and went over to Anastasia. He must have been quietly standing somewhere nearby and listening to our conversation without interfering. But now that the topic had turned to him, he probably felt it was time to make himself known. Vladimir took Anastasia's hand in his own little hands, pressed his cheek against it, and lifted up his head and said, Mamoshka Anastasia, go ahead and answer Papa's question. I can take care of myself. History need not continue to be hidden from people on my account. Yes, that is true, observed Anastasia, stroking the child's little head. You are strong, and you are getting stronger with each passing day. Then, raising her head and looking at me straight in the eye, she pronounced the letters more distinctly than usual, as though introducing herself for the first time. I am a Vedras, Vladimir. I actually felt a kind of extraordinary sensation within me from the word Anastasia pronounced. It felt like a mild electrical current was running over my whole body like a pleasant heat wave, as though imparting some kind of news to every cell of my being. And something unusual, it seemed to me, had happened in the space around me too. The word itself meant nothing to me, but for some reason I rose to my feet upon hearing it. I stood there as though trying to remember something. Once again, this time quite joyfully, Vladimir spoke up. You, Mamoshka Anastasia, are a Vedras beauty, and I too am a Vedras. And he looked at me with a happy grin and said, You are my papa. Just like me, you are a Vedras, only dormant. I'm talking...
Yes, you know, I want another one.
No, put it back. I'm about to make dinner. I'm talking too much again, eh, Mama? I'll go now. I've thought up something marvelous for you and Papa. Before the sun sets behind the trees, I shall create what I have thought up. And catching an affirmative nod from Anastasia, off he went trippingly into the forest. I looked at Anastasia standing there in front of me and thought to myself, the Vedras must be one of the Yugra minorities still living in the far north and Siberia. Footnote, Yugra, the original name of the Khanty, one of the two major aboriginal groups of the province of Khanty Mansisk, Mansisk, located in the northern reaches of the Ob River, just before it flows to the Arctic Ocean. Long footnote. Not reading it all. In 1994, the Khanty Mansisk province there was an international documentary film festival devoted to the Yugra minorities. At the request of the provincial administration, many of the festival participants were quartered aboard my ship on the Aube River. I had the opportunity to talk with them, watch the films and the competition, and travel with the filmmakers to some of the more remote Siberian settlements where shamans were still practicing their craft. I couldn't remember much about the culture and customs of these minority peoples, but I did recall feeling a tinge of sadness over the fact that these extremely small populations were dying out, and people were treating them as some kind of exotic curiosity which would soon be disappearing completely from the face of the earth. I did not recall hearing anything about the participants at this film festival, which could really be considered a major national event, about the Vedras people, and so I asked Anastasia, "Have your people died out, Anastasia? Or rather, are there just a very few of them left? Where were they settled previously?" "Our people have not died out, Vladimir. They are dormant. Our people happily thrived on the territories now known as Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, England, Germany, France, India, China, and many other states, both small and large. Up until quite recently, only 5,000 years ago, in the real world, our people were thriving on lands from the Mediterranean and Black Sea to the farthest northern latitudes. We are Asians, Europeans, and Russians, as well as those who recently called themselves Americans. In fact, God people, all from a single Vedras civilization." Footnote. Ved is a Slavic root signifying knowledge or to know. The word Vedic and Vedas are derived from this root. There was an age of life on our planet known as the Vedic Age. During the Vedic Age, mankind reached a level of sensitive knowledge, allowing it to create energy images through collective thought, and then it underwent a transition into a new era of existence, known as the Image Age. With the help of energy images created by collective thought, mankind was afforded the opportunity of co-creating in the universe. It could have had the ability to create Earth-like life on the other planets, and it would have if it had not committed any mistakes in passing through the Image Age. In the Image Age, however, which lasted for 9,000 years on Earth, mistakes were repeatedly made in the co-creation either of a single image or several images simultaneously. A mistake occurred if there remained in the Earth's human society people with insufficient purity of thought, with an insufficient culture of feelings and thoughts. Such mistakes had the effect of obscuring the opportunity to create in the expanse of the universe and led mankind into occultism. The occult age of human life has lasted for 1,000 years now. It began with an intense degradation of human consciousness. Ultimately, a degradation of consciousness and an insufficient purity of thought, coupled with knowledge and an opportunity at the highest level, would always lead mankind to global disaster. This was repeated many times over billions of Earth years. Now we are in mankind's occult age, and as always, a disaster of global proportions was supposed to take place. It was supposed to, but the deadline has passed. We have passed the end of the occult millennium. Now it is up to everyone to take stock of their purpose, their essence, and where the mistake was made. We should help each other in mentally retracing the course of our history in the opposite direction and pinpoint the mistake. Then an era of joyous life on the earth will be ushered in, an era such as no one has ever witnessed before in global history. The universe is anticipating it with bated breath and great hope. In the meantime, the forces of darkness are alive and prevalent, feverishly trying to control people's minds. But for the first time, they failed to notice the Vedras's unusual behavior back 5,000 years ago. When an image was born by a perverted consciousness upon the earth, an image which desired to exercise control over everybody, that was when the first war began. It was under the influence of this image that people started killing each other. This has happened many times on the earth just before a global disaster. But this time, For the first time, the Vedras civilization did not enter the fray on a non-material plane. Instead, the Vedras fell asleep on their territories, both large and small, switching off a part of their consciousness and feelings. Man's life on the earth seemed to carry on as before. Children were born, houses were built, the decrees of the attackers were obeyed. It seemed as though the Vedras had submitted to the dark forces, but therein lay a great secret. By falling asleep, the Vedras, unconquered, remained alive on all planes of being, and in this happy civilization is dormant right to this day and will continue to sleep until those who are awake search out the mistake of the image creation. That same mistake that led the Earth's civilization to its present-day situation. Once the mistake has been identified with the absolute precision, the dormant ones may hear the words of those who are awake and begin to rouse each other out of sleep. Just who thought up this particular move, I cannot say. It is probably somebody very close to God. You, as a Vedras yourself, should try to wake up, at least a little, and take a look at the course of history. Our people went to sleep on various continents. 3,000 years ago, they were thriving only on what is now Russian territory. At that time, the age of the dark forces had already come upon the whole earth, and the Vedras continued their happy existence only on the island now known as Russia. They very much needed, to hold out another 1,000 years. They had decided how to convey their knowledge to future generations, figure out what was happening on the earth, and determined how a repetition of the mistake could be avoided in the future. They managed to hold out another 1,500 years on this island. They fended off the attacks, but not on a material plane. The darkness had already taken control of people's minds over the whole earth. The priests placed themselves above God and decided to create their own world of the occult. They had already managed to intoxicate a third of the world. But all the forces of darkness could do no harm to our people on this island that is today called Russia. It was only 1,500 years ago that this last island, too, fell asleep. The civilization of the earth, the people who knew God, fell asleep in order to awaken to the dawn of a new reality. The forces of darkness supposed that they had succeeded in destroying this people's culture and the aspirations of their soul forever. This is why they are trying so hard to conceal the history of the Russian people from those living on Earth today. In reality, there is much more to the story. In covering up the history of the Russian people, which can serve as a stepping stone into the world of the beautiful, they are actually trying to cover up the joyously living civilization of the earth, cover up the culture, knowledge, and feeling of knowing God, which are inherent in that glad civilization that your forebears were a part of. Wait, Anastasia, could you tell me a bit more specifically about this instinct, or as you put it, dormant civilization, using simpler terms, easier to understand? And can you prove the existence of this civilization? I can, using simpler words, but it would be 100 times better if each one tries to visualize it for themselves. But is it possible for everyone to see what happened 10,000 years ago? Yes, it is, only in varying degrees and detail, but everyone can get an overall feeling of it, and even one's forebears and one's self in this joyous world. How can everyone do that? How can I do it, for example? It is all very simple. To start with, Vladimir, try to evaluate and compare events you are familiar with just with your own sense of logic. When questions come up, find your own answers to them. What do you mean by logic? How can one learn about the history of Russia, let's say, by logic? Anyway, you said that our Russian history and culture have been destroyed or hidden from all the people of the earth, but how can I, or anybody else for that matter, verify what you just said using logic? Let us try reasoning through this together. I can do a little to help you to get in touch with the history. Okay, then, what needs to be done to start with? To start with, you should ask yourself a question. Which one? A very simple one. Remember, Vladimir, The history textbook you brought for our son. It is called The History of the Ancient World. There are chapters in it discussing the history of ancient Rome, Greece, and China. They describe what Egypt was like 5,000 years ago, but nothing is said of what Russia was like during this time. Never mind 5,000 years, Russia's history and culture, even from 1,000 years ago, are kept in the strictest secret. The textbook is written in the Russian language, aimed at Russian children, but there is not a word in it about the Russia of only 2,000 years ago. Why? Why? I echoed. Indeed, a most peculiar situation. A Russian textbook on the history of the ancient world and says nothing about Russia itself. Not a single word about the history of the Russian people, either during the time of ancient Rome and Egypt or even later. Strange, very strange, as though there were no Russian people living during those times. In trying to recall what I knew of history, I remembered hearing about the existence of the ancient philosophers of Rome, Greece, and China. I never read their works, just heard about them. I also knew that their works were accepted by society as brilliant and outstanding, but I could not recall a single Russian philosopher or poet of that time. Indeed, why? Aware that Anastasia wanted me to try to figure out the answer myself, I said, "Neither I nor anyone else can answer this question, Anastasia. It is a question that's probably not possible to answer." It is possible. Only one must not be lazy in one's logical reasoning. You see, we have come to our first conclusion. The history of the Russian people is unknown, not only to the world at large, but to the Russians themselves. Do you agree, Vladimir? Well, maybe not entirely unknown. We have descriptions of what happened 1,000 years ago. The description was written under censorship and with significant distortion. Besides, the commentaries are the same for every historical event. Russia's past millennium, the Christian era, is like a single day of history. We have Christianity in Russia still today, but can you tell me what preceded it? They say that before Christianity, Russian was a heathen land. People worshipped various gods, but the description is very superficial. There are no writings or even legends about that period. There are no descriptions either of the political system or people's way of life. So, you have reached conclusion number 2. The Russian people had a different culture then. Now use your logic and tell me under what circumstances do attempts arise to hide or distort history? Well, there's a clear answer to that question. People try to falsify history when it's necessary to show the benefits of following a new order, a new authority, a new ideology. But that's completely to conceal any trace of it. Wow, that's incredible. The incredible happened, Vladimir. It is an incontestable fact. Now tell me something else, and do not slacken in your thinking, please. Did this fact come about all by itself, or is it the result of a deliberate effort on somebody's part? Judging by the fact that people have always burnt books when they wanted to stamp out knowledge or ideology, I would say that someone deliberately stamped out all knowledge about pre-Christian Russian culture too. Who do you think would have done that? Who? Most likely the ones who were imposing a new culture and religion on Russia. One might say that, but possibly there was somebody behind it, somebody controlling the new religion. And who imposed it? Someone with their own agenda? But who? Who can control religion? Tell me. You are still looking for answers from the outside. You are too lazy to search for them within yourself. I can give you an answer, but an outside answer may seem to you incredible, and it may provoke a degree of doubt. Everybody can hear the answer within themselves once they have liberated their soul and logic and awakened even just the tiniest bit from sleep. It's not that I'm lazy, it's just that searching for answers within myself will take a lot of time. Better you would tell me yourself what you know about history. If I start having doubts, I'll question you further. I shan't just take your story for granted, but I shall verify it by logic, both now and later on, as you suggest. Let it be as you wish, but I shall merely give you a rough outline of the whole, and let everyone try to fill in the details as they perceive them. Today's reality, along with the past and the future, is something that needs to be determined only within one's self, with one's own soul.